Okay, so now we have cells. Cells are the building blocks of every living thing. A one-celled organism is unicellular, and the rest of us are multicellular. But all living things are made of cells, and so they're a critical part of living things. All right, so cells are made up of little subparts called organelles. And we learned about a whole bunch of them, but there are really 5 that you absolutely must know. So let's make sure that we can identify the cell membrane, the chloroplast, the mitochondria, the nucleus, and the ribosome. I'll give you a moment to do that, and then we'll check. Okay, so let's see how you did. Now, we have A, which is on the animal cell and the plant cell on the inside, and B, which is on the outside. Which one is the cell membrane? A. A is the cell membrane. Every cell has to control what goes in and out of it. So both an animal cell and a plant cell have a cell membrane. Remember that it's selectively permeable. It lets through some things and not others. And one of the key things that decides what can get through is its size. So remember, in the carbohydrates, starch cannot pass, boing, bounces right off. So you digest it down into sugar, in it goes. And why would you need sugar? So that it can get to this organelle to break down sugar to get energy. So that one, let's see, H is the mitochondria. It breaks down sugar to get energy, does cell respiration. So we now have A is the cell membrane and H is the mitochondria. How about the chloroplast? Now the chloroplast makes sugar. It's only found in plant cells. So we're going to look for something only in plant cells. Well, it's right there. It's kind of oval, just like the mitochondrion. So how do you tell the difference? The mitochondrion is squiggly and the chloroplast tends to have discs or lines. Another key giveaway here is that because we have both a plant and an animal cell, we can see that this one is in both and the chloroplast is only in the plant cell. At any rate, mitochondria for cell respiration breaks down sugar. Chloroplast is for photosynthesis, making sugar. Both critical. All right, how about the nucleus? That one's pretty easy. That is E. That's this right here. The nucleus is where the DNA is. And remember, the DNA is used to make mRNA, and then the mRNA leaves, and it goes out to these little dots to make proteins. Those are the ribosomes. So the ribosomes are letter C, those little dots. And that's all of the parts. So let's see how we did with them. Now for the definitions, see how you do. I'll give you a moment to fill in these into these blanks. Okay, so what controls what goes in and out of the cell? Cell membrane, absolutely critical for controlling what goes in and out. And again, it lets in amino acids, it lets in sugars, but it doesn't let in starch or proteins. We digest proteins into amino acids so they can get through, and then we rearrange them inside our cells into proteins. We digest starch into sugar so the sugar can get in, and we can do respiration. Respiration breaks down sugar to get energy and happens in the mitochondria. The mitochondria are for respiration, breaking down sugar and getting energy. Proteins are made at the ribosomes. Remember that the DNA was in the nucleus. It makes the mRNA leaves, it goes to the ribosomes, and the ribosomes are where the amino acids are put together in the correct sequence to make a protein. Stores the DNA. It's also regulatory. That is the nucleus. The nucleus controls most of the rest of the cell by telling it what proteins to make. So the fact that it has the DNA, which is coiled up into chromosomes, which contains genes, is the way that it controls the rest of the cell. And then finally, the chloroplasts produce sugar in plants. Okay. One of the most important things to understand about cells is the cell membrane and how it controls what goes in and out. And so we spent some time talking about transport in and out of the cell. So there's 2 basic ways that transport happens. Either the cell has to work at it or it just happens. Passive transport, also known as diffusion or osmosis if it's water. Passive transport does not require energy. active transport, the cell has to be active. Keep in mind, it's like a rock rolling down a hill. Rocks will just roll from high to low. So if you have a place where there's a whole lot of something, a high concentration, and another place where there's very few, the molecules will just go. They're just going to go from high to low like a rock rolling down a hill. It requires no energy. But if you get that rock all the way down to the bottom where there's low concentration or at the bottom, then you have to push it to try and get it all back together again. And that requires energy to go from a low concentration where there's very few to a high concentration where there's a lot. Okay? One of the most critical things that we learned with this is that the whole purpose of digestion is to make things small enough so they can fit across our cell membrane. The last thing related to cells is actually not just cells, it's the levels of organization. You are expected to know that organelles like a nucleus or mitochondria or ribosomes make up cells. And if you put a bunch of cells all doing the same job together, you get a tissue. And if you have tissues like muscle and a tissue like membrane, and you have tissue like nerve and muscle and blood and all those tissues together, you'll make an organ. A heart and a whole bunch of other organs with the blood vessels makes up a system. And if you put the circulatory system and the digestive system and the reproductive system and the nervous system, endocrine system all together, you get an organism. And we can add now from ecology that if you have a whole bunch of organisms, you have, of the same species, you have a population. And I could have put community when you add the other populations as well. And an ecosystem where you add the abiotic things as well. Okay, and so that's our quick review of cells.